Happy Saturday, everyone. I'm Sunny Shell, and today we're going to be talking with some wonderful guests about the Clergy Project. So hang tight and enjoy yourselves.
Clown fame, a disease, a plague. We all love to hate, have to play the game, have to make a name. All our insecurities are on display. This is war with the enemy. Think that it was meant to be. Living in a time where disease is on every screen. I won't let them fester me. I know most are festering. Negativity is a plague for the mentally weak. No mercy, all I got is working. Never stop searching, never quench the thirst.
Good morning, everybody, or afternoon, everybody. I want to introduce you guys to some of my awesome guests today on Women Atheist Unloaded. So the first one I want to introduce you to is Lon. Hi, Lon.
Hello, Sunny. Glad to be with you today.
I'm very glad that you're here. If you wouldn't mind telling our guests a little bit about yourself.
Well, right now I'm serving as president of the Clergy Project. In fact, I'm just beginning my second 3-year term. I was at one time a Wesleyan pastor, and no longer am. I joined the Clergy Project back in 2011, and I've been out of the pulpit since 2001. Interestingly, when I left the church, I was still a believer, but I went elsewhere to resume making a living for a while, and atheism came to me a bit later. I'm kind of slow, but I figured it out eventually.
Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us today. My next guest is Duane. Hey, Duane, how are you doing?
Hi there. I'm absolutely fabulous.
And if you could tell our guests a little bit, or our viewers a little bit about yourself.
What would you like to know? Okay, first of all, I am with the Clergy Project. I'm currently the vice president of the Clergy Project. And that happened when Lon sent me an engineer's hat and told me I'd been railroaded, and that was it. So... You can laugh. That's all right. Lon is. Anyway, I have been formerly. I got saved in the saved. You like that word? In the Jesus People movement in the early 70s, and I still the date that I got saved was March 30th, 1974, and I eventually went to ministry, mostly evangelism. I hate that word because it doesn't really suit, but it's the only thing that fits. And I traveled around different countries preaching to crowds of people, and I held some relatively serious responsibilities in the denomination I was with. And now I don't believe in God anymore. Reverend Grady does not believe in God. So there you go.
Well, awesome. I'm so glad to have you guys. What I would really like to do just to get this show started is to talk a little bit about what is the Clergy Project and how did it get started?
Okay, well, we can help you out with that. The Clergy Project is a support community for current and former religious leaders who no longer hold any supernatural beliefs.
Well, that's a very simple answer, but it's not a very simple task, I don't think. How did you guys get started with this, or how did the Clergy Project get started?
Well, I got a little history lesson up on my screen in front of me, so I can do this for you. In 1975, Dan Barker was ordained to the ministry in the Standard Community Church in California, served several congregations and several denominations. In 1978, Annie Laurie Gaylor, along with her mom, Ann Nicole Gaylor, launched the Freedom from Religion Foundation. Pastor Dan Barker came out to family and friends as an atheist. Later that year, he appeared with Annie Laurie on a Chicago morning TV show hosted by somebody by the name of Oprah Winfrey. Ever heard of her? And then 3 years later, Annie Laurie and Dan married, and they now serve as co-presidents of the Freedom from Religion Foundation. So we were basically founded through the Freedom from Religion Foundation. In 2006, Dan Barker and Richard Dawkins had met at a humanist conference in Iceland. Richard Dawkins, yes, the microbiologist, and they shared a common interest in religious leaders who no longer believe, and talked about it for a few years. And finally, the Clergy Project was launched in 2011. We were organized as a 501c3 in 2015. And here we are. Also worth mentioning, there was a study done by Daniel Dennett and Linda Lascola, which turned into a book titled Caught in the Pulpit. And these were all some of the things that were going on that resulted in the founding of the Clergy Project.
Thank you so much for that. I personally love the Freedom from Religion Foundation. I think especially with what's going on in our country these days, they're so needed and so important. Just trying to hold on to, the separation of government and religion. So they're fantastic, and it's nice to know that the movement, the atheist movement or modern atheist movement, is looking at ways to help people who are coming out of religion in such an impactful way. So when we think about the Clergy Project itself, I know for me, I'm not a clergy person, but I was telling you behind the scenes, I work in at a place that I cannot be free with my views, that I could lose my job. What I can't imagine is being in this position and having to come up with and write sermons and stand up and talk about something that I no longer believe in. I wondered if we could kind of dive into that a little bit. Do you have a lot of current pastors, clergy who are trying to transition out but aren't at that place yet where they feel that they can?
Do you have a statistic on that, Lon, a percentage?
Well, typically, our rolls show about 25% of us are current religious leaders, but that's probably inflated because I'm sure that some of us escape the clutches of religion and neglect to notify the Clergy Project of this wonderful news. So it's probably less than that.
Okay. What are some of the struggles that they go through as they're trying to transition?
Well, Duane, were you caught in the pulpit as such? You gonna have some?
No, not really. I was so lucky. I was. If you want to hear my story, I'll tell it. But I was just going to say that I've been in touch with a few Clergy Project people who I screened and helped get in. And there's one who's senior in his denomination. He's senior enough so he doesn't work in churches anymore. He's up in the head offices, and he's just waiting for his retirement, 65, and then he's out of there. But he's got to get his pension. That's what keeps a lot of people. And we have another person, I believe, in New York. Don't want to say too much because he's still working in the pulpit, and he's his people, his congregation owns the house he lives in, owns the car he drives, and he's got absolutely zero education of any value to do anything and zero experience for anything else in the world. So, these are the ones that have the toughest. Now, I was lucky because in spite of my, I only pastored a few times. And sort of the last time I did it, I was pastoring. I sort of did it as a favor to a friend, for a friend. I have always funded my own work. I was really stupid. I was unbelievably naive. I actually believed that if God wanted me to be somewhere, he'd provide the money. Like, I should have took lessons from Joel Osteen and Benny Hinn because they know how to rake it in. But so I had businesses at home that I could leave running while I was traveling with my kids and doing the thing I thought I was called to do. So, no, I did not end up getting caught in the pulpit, but my story's probably a little unique, but whatever. Tell you if you want to know.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about both of your stories. As a matter of fact, I think that might be a great next step before we go further into the Clergy Project itself. Just hearing a little bit about your own stories.
Okay.
Well, while we're still on the topic of people caught in the pulpit, I just want to say that when we realize that there is no God, we're so happy to hear that. Well, we're not all happy to hear that, but there's a definite inclination among some of us that we want to share the good news of no gods with everyone. And we have to discourage our folks from doing that, especially when they're still involved in religious leadership. They need to come up with an exit plan. They need to be very careful, and they need only to tell the people that they have to tell. Like, it's hard to avoid sharing something like that with your spouse. So you may have to tell a few people right at home, but you don't need to tell everyone. Did I mention, by the way, that this is all Oprah Winfrey's fault? Yes, I did. And okay. And Dan Barker, as a matter of fact, when he decided that he no longer believed, he wanted to tell everyone. Now, this was way back in the old days. Probably some of you don't remember this far back, but to tell everybody, he wrote letters. Yeah, to everyone he knew in ministry and in the family, and he mailed a whole bunch of letters. And we don't recommend that. Dan survived that adventure, but no, we wouldn't recommend that sort of approach to anyone.
Yeah, that's a very tough thing. I actually remember the Oprah Winfrey episode.
Do you really?
Yes, I do. When he was on with Annie Laurie and her mother. And it was, my heart raced for him. My heart raced for the three of them, because they were kind of thrust into a lion's den in a sense, for lack of a better analogy. That was quite intense. And Oprah's reaction, I think, is, what's the word I'm looking for? It's kind of the best of what we can expect when we come out, and yet it's very difficult. And he did it on a national stage. Yeah. I mean, that to me is bravery. And he was so calm. He seemed so calm and so just put together. And it was I can't even imagine. I thought it was very impactful, that episode.
Everybody has a different story. And there are some, the ones that can't talk about it or can't. The Clergy Project provides a place of safety, a safe harbor or safe haven, if you will, for the people who, especially the people who don't have any other place to go. And I guess for that, we're all sort of in it for a different reason. But also, I want to say, Lon knows this. I took a few years off of ministry work, and I became a stand-up comedian. I was pretty good at it. And there, you might remember a guy named Sam Kinison. Sam was a Pentecostal type preacher, and he took a lot of what he learned from preaching into comedy. I guess I did too. But after I went back to ministry, I took a lot of what I learned from comedy, and performing into preaching. And that's it was an exponential increase in my abilities. But I also saw Sam on a talk show one time. He was already famous for not being a minister anymore. And just randomly, he starts talking about being and he starts to preach the same way he did before. And I realized, I could probably still do it too. If I was still locked in the pulpit and I had to do it, I'd have no problem, because it's all a performance. Once you realize that, I know how to write and I know how to speak and I know how to be relaxed and make people feel comfortable. So that is a lot of the of what has to happen with these people. Now, some people would have a hard time with it, but once you realize that everybody's being fooled anyway, and this is, you got to feed your kids and pay your bills, then it's not a hard one for me. It wouldn't be hard to get over.
That's interesting that you say that, because in my line of work, like I told you guys before, I'm not having to proselytize in any way. I'm not having to do that. But one of the most common things that I see in my job is people use religiously or Christian laced verbiage all the time. It's a constant thing, and it grates on my nerves. Everyone says blessed or
Bless your heart.
yeah, bless you. And yeah, and I am in the
which
South.
is a code phrase. Yeah,
it is. But even now, like you'll be talking about someone and someone will just go bless. It's it's almost like awe. It's such a common term.
Yeah.
And people say well, God bless you before they get off the phone, or it's just so ingrained and everyone assumes that you're a Christian.
I worked a lot in the southern U.S., all up and down the East Coast, and they do assume that. But the other thing about just popping off "bless God" or "bless you" is that you're not thinking anymore. It becomes a cliche. You're not even thinking about what it means, and it's just part of the language. So it means less than nothing to me.
Right. Except for me. For me, it's like a nail on a chalkboard.
Yes.
Yeah. I make it meaningful. For instance, when somebody sneezes around me, I just say, "I bless you very much."
That's why he's the president.
I like that. That's really funny. I like that. So let's go back really quickly. I'd like to hear y'all's story if I can, if you guys don't mind. Either one of you can go.
Yeah, I'll talk for a while. And I did, even before I do that, I do want to tell you that when I realized we were going to be on Women Atheists Unloading, I tried to get some women to join us, and nobody was available. One declined after the other. They had other things going on.
They just didn't want to be on the screen with us old guys.
I know. I mean, I just struck out. It's the story of my life, so I put on a necktie.
Yeah.
There you go.
Well, if I'd have known, no one told me the dress code.
Oh. But I have just a T-shirt on, so y'all look great as far as I'm concerned. And we are Women Atheists Unloaded, but I think the important thing is these are topics that mean something to us. They're first of all, in at least where I'm at, there's very few women pastors because women aren't to teach men. The whole idea of women teaching kind of helped to split the Baptist. There's the Southern Baptist versus I don't know what else. All I know is the Southern Baptist anymore. But that was one of the not the main thing, but it was one of the things that helped to split that. So there's not very many, and yet every woman that I know proselytizes and feels that they need to share the gospel with everyone. And I find that kind of ironic. So this topic is still important to women, even if, in many areas, there's not a lot of women pastors.
Yeah. I usually come on these shows with something under my back pocket. And just coincidentally, Lon was supposed to speak. Do you notice how I just bowled him over and pushed him away? Anyway, the thin end of the wedge, and when you're interviewing somebody or, for the Clergy Project, I use that term. What was the thin end of the wedge for you? Where did your disbelief start? Where did you start to have trouble? Well, I started to have these little, not doubt, but little things like, what? Back in around 2000, I was a senior pastor. I was governor of Ontario from a denomination, which was hilarious because I was always traveling. And then for about 18 months, I like to say I was the Pope. I was in charge of the world because the senior most pastor in our denomination was in jail. And you would not believe what he was in for. Anyway, never mind that. So that I had 2 years in a row where I put on the International Pastors Conference, which gave me a great big platform to speak on. And boy, did I ever let him have it the first time. Man, did I ever let him have it. I took him in Genesis where Eve is called a helpmate and how we all think of that as a lower thing, as a condescending thing. Helpmate, an apprentice, someone who gets your coffee, someone who hands you the wrong screwdriver when you're trying to get some work done. Wrong, because that was Genesis 2:18. If you move to Psalm 33, 2:20, whatever. Never mind. It's in the Psalms. And the if you look at the Hebrew, which nobody, you can imagine a Christian learning Hebrew. They don't even read their bloody Bibles. What do they read? Anyway, but in the original Hebrew word is, and there's 5 words that they could have used. The writers, don't forget, they were Hebrew writers. They were speakers of the language, and they were Jewish people. They knew how to speak Hebrew, damn it. And there was 5 words. You know, the famous 5 words for love in Greek, agape, phileos, etc. And it's the same. That these words can be used to be specific. You don't have to guess at it, but English is bad like that. So anyway, the word they chose, I don't have it in front of me, in Hebrew, was one who condescends to help. Stop right there. And how can you prove that? Because remember, there's 5 words. And if they had meant an apprentice helper that hands you tools and gets your coffee, they could have said it. There's 4 other words you could have chosen. And one of them would have specifically said that. But now you go forward to Psalms, and that's talked about God. God, he says, I am your helpmate. And oh my goodness, they use the same word. Isn't that interesting? I did that. There was preachers, ministers from all around the world. And I had them in captive audience for a number. It was a tail end of a seminar I did on biblical authority. And I tailed it off into this and how we don't study. We don't know what we're talking about. And I was really hard on them. And I said, we don't know what we're talking about because we believe this for centuries. And why? Because we believe something incorrectly and then we propagated it. And now we have women who aren't allowed to do this and aren't allowed to do that. And never mind the Timothy and all that other nonsense. I know that's there too. But from the outset, I sound like I'm preaching like I believe this nonsense. But if you're just sticking to the word of the Bible and what's written, it's a contradiction right there. Is God your helpmate? Is God, it says he is. So is he your apprentice? Is he going to go and get your coffee for you? Is he going to, go get a left-handed monkey wrench? That's a joke. But, we don't think about this. We just don't think of anything. And anyway, so I met, and I challenged those people. And there was hundreds of preachers from around the world. I challenged them. So you got my email address. You know where I live. You got my phone number. If I'm wrong, come at me. Come on. Well, boy, did I ever get thanked by there was 2 women ministers, and boy, did I ever get a handshake from them. So there, this whole women's issue has bugged me. It's actually pissed me off a lot. And there was more than just that, but that's when I started to say, this is wrong. It was around that time of my life. And it was funny because I was at the peak of ministry. I was traveling. I was popular. Everybody wanted me. And I was being courted by, what are those people called? People who come from other countries to represent embassy people. And because of the work I was doing, and I was just on the verge of having it made. All I had to do is shut my mouth and keep going. But the poison that, once you realize stuff and you've opened that can of worms, you can't close it.
Yeah.
There's more to my story, but I'm going to shut up now. It's you
No,
can have it back, Sonny.
No, you many of the things that you said were very important and impactful, especially in the way that I experienced religion. And as a woman, I was simultaneously told to be meek and mild and to follow the leadership of the man. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, I was, if he faltered, I was responsible for getting him back into the church and getting him, keeping him strong. Well, you can't do both. It ends up being that you have a lot of responsibility to be things you can't possibly be.
Yeah, all the major religions do that sort of thing.
Yes, they do.
In certain countries where Sharia law, if a man rapes you, it's your fault. You didn't dress right. And it's the same. That's a crude nutshell of the same attitude.
Yeah. And that change doesn't stop with religion. Unfortunately, religion has had such an impact on our society that you don't have to be religious to still feel that way. People in this day and age say a woman's raped. What was she wearing? Where was she at? Was she drinking? It's about her and the actions that she did that led to her victimization instead of, the actions of the man. And I think it's rooted in religion.
It all is. And religion has permeated society on so many levels, so many layers. And the more I opened my eyes, the more I saw it, and the more I realized that my uncle, who claimed to be an agnostic, the more I realized he was right. And I never got a chance to tell him that because he died in 2004, and I quit ministry in 2005 and 2006. There's two things there. So, you know what? This is a horrifically unfair oppression that we've brought not only on women, but on ourselves. When you're talking about, you have to, be, serve your husband and be faithful and let him, let's just be, let him run the house and be the king. Have you ever seen anybody, those videos, idiots in cars?
Yeah.
And they do something like phenomenally stupid, and they end up, the car's on the roof and the cops there arresting him. And I think, there's a lot of marriages like that. And there's a lot of women out there, a lot of Christian women who live a life just like that, but they have to obey that idiot.
Oh, absolutely. And they take on the responsibility. He is not doing what he needs to be doing because I'm somehow deficient and I haven't been faithful enough, and that sort of thing. Lon, I'd like to go to you. That was very fascinating, Duane, and I want to hear your story now, Lon.
No? Okay.
You're like, really now?
I was thinking demographics just a bit, though, because we were talking about ladies. And about 14% of Clergy Project participants are women. And when you consider how patriarchal an institution religion is, that is probably significantly higher representation than you would find in the religious world. And that is, of course, because women are smarter than guys. So, and I put on a tie. Did I mention that? And and we're also not all former Christians. There are former Muslims. There's former rabbis. We have a Hindu here and a Buddhist there and a Native American medicine woman and a couple of Wiccans. And so we have a pretty good variety. We are in 49 states out of 50 in the U.S. We have no participants in North Dakota because no one actually lives there. We're in 7. Yeah, I know. Prove me wrong. And we're in 7 provinces in Canada, and we're in more than 50 countries around the world. So while 96% of us are Americans and mostly former Christians, we're represented around the world. And so, yeah.
That'll change.
Now you want me to talk about me?
Yeah, I would love for you to talk about you. And now I have all these other questions I want to ask you too. But let's talk your story, and then we'll get back to those questions.
Let me give this a try. Okay, so I was brought up in a Christian family very early on. When I was very, very young, we lived out in the country. There was a Pentecostal church down the road, just I don't know, a mile or so. Pentecostal church pastored by 2 women. Okay. Which means that it was a tiny Pentecostal church and probably didn't pay anything. And they apparently invited our family to church. And so we went, and eventually, I guess we invited grandparents and they started coming. They also lived nearby. And most of us pretty well got sucked into this Christianity thing, except my sister. Okay. I have a brother and a couple sisters, but the older of the 2 sisters couldn't figure out what was going on. She thought we were just going to church because we liked the Sunday school picnic and and various other social activities. And mind you, at this point, she was maybe 6 years old. And she thought her family, if we really believed this, that we were just crazy. And she never really got into it. And that's, the way different individuals in the same family, the way their brains are wired differently, I guess. So there's that. Anyways, we moved to town when I was 8 years old, and some folks invited us to a new Baptist church. So all of a sudden we were GARB Baptists instead of Pentecostals. And I kind of was into it, but I saw the contradictions in the Bible from a very young age, and I was trying to figure out what denomination actually had all of this figured out and made sense of it. And I kept exploring the beliefs of various denominations, and of course I didn't find any. But then when I was 41 years old, middle-aged, family, and a full-time job and several part-time jobs, the non-existent God tapped me on the shoulder and told me I was going into ministry. And it was at church camp, as a matter of fact. I was paying no attention to what was going on, and it had nothing to do with people going into the ministry. I think it was in the middle of a treasurer's report, a district treasurer's report at this point, which didn't interest me either. And this just hit me out of the blue. And so started a few years of really significant insanity, mental illness on my part. I immediately went to my pastor. He immediately took me to the district superintendent, who was in charge of the Board of Ministerial Development. They got me started taking courses through Indiana Wesleyan University, which I could take, correspondence course type of thing, and picked other courses up at Houghton College, which is a Wesleyan liberal arts college. And in a few years, I took enough courses, just a couple of years, a few years more accurate. I had taken enough courses not to be eligible for ordination, but I was eligible to be licensed as a pastor, and took my first church in Georgia. So I went down south to spend a year there, and it was not a real positive experience. We got out of there and went to Pennsylvania. The Wesleyans have a time of year when everybody who's going to resign or move on to another church, they let everybody know. So it's like the Wesleyan silly season. But when I was in Georgia, I got in trouble for talking to Black people. Some actually came to a midweek service, which everybody was very, very polite. But when my Black friends left, I was told in no uncertain terms that was not to happen again.
Wow. So
you get the gist of that. So I left it at the time when silly season rolled around, and I went north and took a church in northern Pennsylvania, and got in similar trouble there in practically no time, because I was too cordial with Amish people. So, Christianity is a hate group no matter where you go. So,
wow.
And then I went home to Elmira, New York, where I am now, served as an assistant pastor. So I pastored a total of 6 years, and left the pulpit in 2001. Because I decided that there was the denomination was not going to ordain me, and I needed to make a living. Went back to my normal work in industry, and it was 6 years later I was on assignment in Japan, and it occurred to me that I really no longer believed at all anymore. I was going to make a list of things that I had good reason to believe. And started with number one, the existence of God. And then I thought a minute and I said, there's really no reason to believe that. And that was as far as I went with my list. And I decided the next day I would be an atheist, and left it all behind. zero regrets. Was a bit dismaying to my wife and family members, but yeah, I wouldn't go back for anything. So that's my story in a nutshell.
Well, one thing you just mentioned is something that I question. I have questions about is not that I question myself, but that I've had questions about. Many of these pastors or clergy, because they come from all different. I say pastors because that's what I'm used to. So sorry about that. If they were to, and mine would be male pastors, if they were to feel this way and leave the church, they would lose their wives, their spouses. They would probably lose their kids, as well as, like you talked about, their home, their car, and have no marketable skills. What does the Clergy Project do to help these clergy people who are, in fear, I'm sure, of losing not just their faith, but everything? What are some of the things that the Clergy Project does for them?
And some of us do lose everything. And some of us really fret about having to tell our spouses. And a few of us, when we finally get around to telling our spouses, this isn't my story, but other stories, when they finally are, up against the wall and have to admit to their spouse that they no longer believe, their spouse has responded, well, no shit. I was waiting for you to figure it out. We got to get out of here. Others of us do, obviously lose homes because we maybe are housed in parsonages or, church provided housing. And others do lose families and, along with their jobs, along with their whole social network. So everything is at risk. What does the Clergy Project have to offer? Well, we have to offer our online community as well as a closed Facebook group so we can get together and commiserate and joke about some of the things we've been through. We also offer vocational training so that they can get some help with interview skills and help with their resume. And we also offer counseling through the Secular Therapy Project by way of recovering from religion. So those are some of the things that we can do to help folks. But, frankly, some of our folks are in very, very difficult circumstances. And we may never hear the happy or the unhappy ending to their stories.
Good point.
About some of them, yeah.
So you had, and in fact, I'll go ahead and bring in one of the questions because it kind of segues into a question that I have. Aaron Coalson asked, does the Clergy Project see a particular denomination in the U.S. leaving their faith, probably meaning more than others? Like, is there a denomination that's leaving more than others?
Yes, of course, but it's only because it's so big. And it was mentioned earlier, that would be Baptists. There are Southern Baptists and then there are all the other Baptists. And the biggest group in the Clergy Project are Baptists. Mm-hmm. Catholic would be another very large group. And then your mainline denominations and evangelical denominations and other religions entirely. But, yep, Baptist.
With the current political climate, the way that it's been over the last several years, has there been more people leaving because of the kind of radicalization of the evangelical movement with far right politics? Or is that just something that if I was both a moderate Republican or an evangelical that wasn't necessarily radicalized, both of those, the way that things are, I would anticipate that people would want to leave those. So are you seeing that?
You might hope so, but no, we're not seeing it. Our applications are pretty steady. In fact, over the course of time, they've kind of tapered off because it started off very busy when we were first created. But no, we haven't seen any big increase or anybody really citing the social political climate for getting out of religion and coming to us. So No.
That's interesting, and it makes me a little bit sad. I would love to see a mass exodus of people who have some, at least, what's the word I'm looking for? Haven't totally given up their critical thinking skills, I guess. Because I really feel that this radicalization has, it's come about from people who no longer think for themselves in any way. And Trump has become kind of a demigod in a way.
Go ahead, Duane.
Oh,
What's your impression?
She said the T word. I'm leaving. Interesting. It's interesting. Most of I've spoken to, I don't know, a few dozen of new inductees to the Clergy Project over the past couple of years. And a lot of the problems I'm hearing, or a lot of the things that I'm hearing that are cited as issues, personal issues for people, is the church's stance on the LGBTQ and all the rest, the alphabet community, and and issues that don't make sense. Because of my background, I'm able to speak to a lot of people. I can interview anybody. Whereas if you're a Catholic, they'll try and get you with Catholics. I can talk to anybody. So I'm hearing, and it's interesting because it's the same complaints. And then there's a control of the superiors. And I mean, I interviewed a Mormon, a Jehovah's Witness, and what's that? Not the Amish one. There's another one, and they all say essentially the same thing. And
Mennonite.
That's close enough. It's a branch of them. But anyway, so it's funny. I don't hear a lot about politics, but I'm in Canada, and Canada's this whole different country, right? So it's there's some in the Christian world. We tend to be very, very conservative up here, and pastors have no problem telling you from the pulpit that you shall vote conservative, or you will be, cast into the lake of fire. Not quite, but so, and that evangelical stuff, I think, I don't know, long term I can't predict, but I cannot see it being good for the church, and I certainly cannot see it being good for American Christianity, because it is spilling over to other countries.
Yeah, it really is. You're exactly right. It's not a uniquely American thing.
Mm-hmm.
What about especially in the Catholic Church, but now we've seen it kind of spread to other denominations. So as reports have come out about church clergy being protected after cases of child abuse, sexual abuse, do you have a lot of people who have come out when those things happen, those reports come out? Do you see an influx of clergy coming out after those?
No, Duane's a little closer to the front lines because he is a screener. He talks to our applicants. So he may have more insight on this, but in general, no.
Wow.
I think that's might have come up a couple times, but you see, that's not just a Catholic thing.
Mm-hmm. There's
a huge church in Toronto here that had, I think, about they had a capacity of almost 10,000 people. I don't think it was ever full, but they had a pastor there who was nationally famous, and he was known enough in certain parts of the States too. And he was caught in several homosexual relationships. He was caught accused of molesting children. And what did they do? They protected him. They hid him. They prayed for him and said he was repentant. So, no, it's not just a Catholic thing. And in fact, it's a heavy problem in the Baptist. One of the Baptist denominations down south, somewhere down south, or up south, depending where you are, and I'm good at geography. So I think that this is actually a unifying factor. It's not a good one, but it's something that all denominations can share, all religions can share, without pointing fingers at the other religions. Yeah, there's just as many stories of leaders taking. Now, here's the thing, okay? I told you I was the leader of the whole world in my denomination. And knowing that you're that powerful, knowing that nobody can get ordained, nobody can start a church without getting put by you first. And knowing that you can decree something and it shall be done. That kind of power can go to someone's head.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are in a powerful position for too long, same with politicians. If you are in a powerful position for too long, you get accustomed to it. And that's when the foolishness starts to happen. Mm. So I was usually a guest preacher. So I was not just, next to God, but I was, I was an untouchable. Do not touch the hem of his garment without permission. It's ridiculous. But if you let that go to your head, you can get like Jim Jones. I'm sure that's what happened to Jim Jones in Guyana, in Jonestown. This is, adulation and putting a preacher, a minister on a pedestal and letting him be the man of God. And people do it. They worship their man of God. They're not supposed to. Notice there are not too many women of God, but there's Joyce Myers. I bet you they worship her too. So you get to a position where you can do anything you want to do and justify it. And you are untouchable because millions of people, hundreds of people, dozens of people support you, and you are it. And anyone who comes against you is of the devil.
Oh, gosh, I have got to, this doesn't have anything to do with the Clergy Project, but it is extremely important. Mm-hmm. That's my field. I work with child abuse victims, and I work with the judicial system, social services, law enforcement, and so forth. I can't tell you how many times we have had, especially clergy people, who are accused. And instead of them rallying around the child, they all rally around the pastor. They will come to to court and give their testimonies on what a upstanding person he is, and they just can't believe it. And I've even seen judges who, after the jury has come back with a guilty verdict, stand there and say in front of the child and the family that, I'm so sorry, that if I could, I would eliminate this. And, so I'm going to give you, a lesser sentence. And it's extremely frustrating, mm-hmm. not just for me, for the people that I work with and for the child. What's interesting is that the people that I work with who are religious, they don't look at that. For me, I'd be like, well, where is God? I would question so many things with my faith if I was still of that mindset. They don't. It's like they divorce the two, and I don't understand that.
Yeah, and the Catholic Church has been covering this stuff up for over 1,000 years, I'm sure, but it is endemic to all religions, without a doubt.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's with the kids, and it's the same with abused wives. I think the church has blood on its hands for what they force people to do. I said just casually many years ago when I just first came with the church, I said that religion is a great way. It is a tool of control. It is a way to control women first and then children. It's control. So when the child has no power over the great man of God, how much greater control can you give somebody? Yeah, that's a whole different program, I suppose.
That is. We'll leave it there. But
glad to come back.
I'm
angry.
Yeah. Well, what gets me is that on these these big topics, the two questions that I've just asked, we see that same kind of splitting of brain and reality, in that, you would think you would see at least an uptick in exodus of clergy as we see the radicalization of evangelical and right wing, and as you see more and more reports of of church of clergy being protected when those reports come out. I want to move on from that, though, and ask you a question about, you had said that about 90% of the people are U.S. or maybe U.S. Canada, North American, I guess. But you also said that you have a lot of other religious groups that are a part of this. And I was really curious about Muslims. I don't know if Muslims in the U.S. are as in danger as maybe the Muslims in the Middle East. It would seem like, but I don't know. We've seen women who have been beheaded here in the U.S. when something has gone on. So I'm curious about your Muslim clergy. If they, what is the Clergy Project able to do for them in particular, especially if they are in the Middle East? It seems like that's a very difficult thing, because then you're not just talking about how to have a safe exodus, and maybe you might lose your family. In the Middle East, you could lose your life. And so I'm just curious, what do you do in particular for Muslims in the Middle East?
Yeah, I can't say that we have a lot of participants, Muslim from the Middle East, but we have probably 10, 15 Muslims that are participants. In fact, on our board, one of our directors and the treasurer of the Clergy Project is a former Muslim imam.
Wow.
Yeah.
But he lives in the U.S., so.
Sure. I love this story. He comes from Africa, and he moved to one of the coldest places in the U.S. Now he's safe. He's good. No one's going to chase him there.
Well, do you see, though, for the other Muslims that are in the U.S., do they still feel in fear of their life?
Is there still an element of social constraint in the U.S.? You're not free to go out and tie someone to a post in town square and whip them, but there are other ways, I'm sure, that they get them. Lon, anything on that?
No, not much. Of course, we do have a group in the U.S., ex-Muslims of the USA, I believe, or something like that. So there certainly are many of them, and certainly they have risks to their not only their livelihood, but risk to their lives. Yeah, because religion is the same all over, and so yeah, it's perhaps more dangerous to be an ex-Muslim in the U.S. or Canada than it is to be an ex-Christian religious leader.
But now think of that. It's dangerous enough to be an ex-Muslim, but to be an ex-imam, that's a step above. Now, back in the 90s, I had one of my businesses. I employed 52 people, 4 of whom were white Canadians, and the remainder were Muslim refugees from various countries, mostly Iran, but various countries. And they had made committed the what is the word of a cardinal sin? No, that's the wrong religion. But they left Islam and became Christians. And so, I mean, boy, I heard stories. One guy, if he ever had a shirt off, you'd see that his back had been ripped to shreds. It's like they put a bunch of hamburger on his back and said, "There, that's your skin now." And that was his cue to get out of that country. And he there was a certain route they all took into Germany, then to Canada, and then you claim refugee status. But
wow.
Now can you imagine an imam?
Wow.
I can't help but believe that there are some really intelligent people out there who might be imams and might think, okay, how do I get out of this?
Yeah. Yeah. In that case, I think I would probably just continue doing what I was doing.
Yeah. Remember Sam Kinison? He could preach just like he actually believed it.
Yeah.
And and I think that most religious leaders do not believe the bullshit that they get paid to promote, because sooner or later, and we're, with a few exceptions, we're fairly intelligent folks, and I'm convinced that most of us figure it out eventually, and then it's a case of, what do I do? Do I have to get out of this because I just can't stand the conflicts going on in our minds, or do I put on an act forever because it seems to be working? I'm good at this and I'm making a lot of money. So there's a lot of reasons for staying and keeping on doing what you're good at, that is providing for your family and maintaining your power base. Yeah. Others of us cannot handle it and have to get out, and that's the courageous 1,200 people we have enrolled as Clergy Project participants right now. Courageous people who had to get out.
We have another question from our audience, from Kathy Humanist. Do you see many Calvinists?
Well, yes. And of course, Baptists are essentially Calvinists and Presbyterians. And so, yes. Yeah. So, yeah, they all were never saved in the beginning, obviously. So.
Very good.
Very good. Very good. So we're getting close to our hour, and I want to respect your time. And what I would really like to do is get your thoughts, just an overall closing thought from each of you. I want to give you plenty of time to be able to say what you feel our audience needs to take away concerning the Clergy Project. Duane, we'll start with you.
Okay, I happen to have something on my mind before you say that, but I was thinking about control and how we get away from that. And one of the biggest reliefs I have not being in ministry anymore is I'm no longer obligated to control anybody. And there was a pressure, which I never enjoyed, never liked that. We used to have a monthly pastors meeting, which I attended, and whenever I was at home in Toronto and I wasn't away, I would go to this meeting. It was multicultural, although I was the only white pastor there or minister. And I remember a time when a man came in, one of the pastors, and he was really upset because he had counseled his sister to stay with her husband who beat her. And he said that God would heal, God would fix everything. Well, in the meantime, this pastor's brother-in-law had beaten her to death. And now she's dead. This is what I said. The church has blood on its hands. Now, I've lost touch with that pastor today, and I don't know where he is, but I often wonder how he came away from that experience. Your sister is dead because of your words, because of what you believed God was telling you through that nonsensical fairy tale, the Bible. Now your sister's dead. And that's just one story. The church has blood on its hands. I guess that's a good ending. No, it's not. But that pastor, I'm sure today, does he still believe? Has he got any doubts? If he doesn't, shame on him.
Good point. So, Lon, let's go with you. What's the closing thing that you would like for our audience to know?
Well, I would just like to say that maybe it's a little easier now with the internet and everything and the flow of information to come out and leave religion, even as a religious leader, and find your way and survive. And so I'm sure that there are multitudes of religious leaders leaving religion who don't join the Clergy Project, and that's all right. Nevertheless, we have a public website, www.clergyproject.org, and you can check that out and learn more about the Clergy Project and learn how you can donate to the Clergy Project if you're so inclined. And if you are a religious leader who no longer holds supernatural beliefs, you can find a link to an application And some nice folks like Duane himself, one of our screeners, will talk to you and do a little interview, and we'd be very happy to have you among us.
Thank you so much. I do want to ask you one quick question before we end, and that is, if someone is a clergy who wants to get out, how do they know that they are safe, that their identity is protected?
Okay, so they can use a pseudonym on the Clergy Project. They don't have to use their real names, and also we can just put up I can't think of the term for it, but instead of a picture uploading automatically from the internet, which would typically happen, we can put something else on their profile to prevent that. They can later, as they feel ready, they're welcome to put their real picture up or maybe put their real name up. It's up to them. But we can protect them, and we've had no security breaches that I've ever known of on our private forum or in our closed Facebook group. So welcome all.
Fantastic. And you said, Duane, you're a screener for it. So the clergy who are coming into this, they have to be screened before they can join?
Yep.
Can you tell us just a little bit about that?
Well, I think all screeners have a different method, but I have a psychological way of talking and listening to people, because I'm looking for a certain language. I'm looking for stories. I'm looking for, I guess, an underlying attitude. Anybody I've ever caught out, I caught before the interview, like someone claiming to not believe and claiming to be out, and then you see a YouTube video of them preaching hellfire and brimstone just a couple of days ago, last Sunday. Well, wait a second. So you can ask them about that. But no, basically it's a feel, And when I worked with immigrants, with refugees, we knew that if you really had converted to being a Christian, then you could fake it for a while. You could you could say the right words, and you could get away with it for a while, but not forever. And the longest would be 6 months before you'd slip up. So in a more condensed period of time, we're just looking for your experience. Do you say the right things, and that sort of thing. It's not that scientific.
Well, thank you both so much. I wanted anyone who happens to be watching who is a clergy right now who wants help, I wanted them to know that that this is a safe place and there's a process. But both of you guys do extremely important and wonderful work, and I want to thank you both for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having us.
Well, what a pleasure to be here.
Excellent. Thank you.
Right.
Anytime.
Yeah, that too.
Fantastic. For those of you in the audience and who will see this later, thank you so much for taking the time to tune in and see this interview. I want to let you know a little bit about what's coming up on Monday on my show, the Sunny Spot. We will be having Grief Without Religion with Candace Gorham and Seth Andrews. I am going to be geeking out about this. I also find this near and dear to my heart because my father passed a couple years back, and my family's not religious, and I see that versus how some of the people that I work with and associate with who have lost family who are religious, and there's a very different way that we go about the grief process. So I'm really looking forward to that show. That's Monday at 8. So y'all check it out. Monday, 8 Eastern Standard Time. I want to thank our patrons, because without them, we could not continue doing the work that we do. Our patrons are Kathy Cotton, Cindy Plaza, Bryce Aroni, Jena Miyu, Deborah Grace, Aaron Coalson, Phil Calderone, and me, Sunny Shell. If you would like to help us out, you can either become a patron or you can subscribe, hit the bell, share, do all those wonderful things, because they really do help us out. I want to thank those behind the scene, Wes, Kat, Phil, and Corey, who are the ones who do all of the producing. I also want to thank the two who do most of the guests, getting our guests together, and that's Shane and Aaron. You guys are awesome, and I really appreciate you guys. So until next time, remember to always think critically. Have a great weekend, everybody. Bye-bye.
But if I lay down and I play dead and I stay dead. Baby, you'll get sick of being the monster out of my head, under my bed. Think you're something out of my nightmares, standing right there. But if I lay down and I play dead and I stay dead, then will you get bored of killing me?
Silhouettes of you are like a taunt. Never really know just what you want. With you I don't ever feel calm. I can feel the sweat inside my palm. Play with me like cats and a string. You don't understand the pain it brings. You don't ever wanna give me wings. You don't ever wanna set me free. You know I'm addicted to you, and it's twisted. You've been gifted with the evil voodoo. Got me coming back for more, even when I've been screwed. Dolls full of pins, pierce my heart straight through. I got issues.